This is Wario Stadium, one of the retro courses in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It was first released in Mario Kart DS, but for its return in Mario Kart 8, Nintendo reimagined the track, making some drastic overhauls to its layout. These changes made for an outstanding refresh of an old course, and one that many players would come to love. Just weeks after the game launched, Wario Stadium was already riddled with advanced techniques, both on ground and in the air. This made it stand out from the rest, as one of few highly technical courses, and it garnered a lot of attention from the player base. It required extensive practice to master the track, and while most players practiced for consistency, some went above and beyond to compete for the fastest times in the world. When the game launched, many turned to Wario Stadium to hone their skills, and in the 8 years of competition since, the developments this track has seen have been nothing short of incredible. This is the story of Mario Kart's most competitive track. The first run we'll take a look at was set 1 month into the game, a 153 by the player Hemisphere. The track starts out with 2 left turns, where he goes for 2 super mini turbos. Then there's a boost panel ramp, where Hemi reduces airtime by doing a short drift, also known as a slide. Upon landing he gets a trick boost, and follows it up with a mini turbo. He then drives over these boost panels and does 2 slides to align the kart. The next segment is very distinct, as it has boost ramps launching you high into the air, known as the double ramps. By doing 3 hops in quick succession, you can drift right off the first ramp and then left off the second. By releasing a mini turbo mid-air, this maneuver strings together one continuous boost, and upon landing you release an SMT. In the anti-gravity section, Hemi cuts both corners before dropping down. He does an empty onto the boost panel, another drift into the air, before sinking through the water to take a shortcut. He chains a UMT at the exit, hops over the glider panel, and the next lap begins. This record was solid for its time, but throughout the following months, the track would see many more developments. A player called SuperFX first improved the record down to a 749, in which he released this empty early for a tighter line, barely remaining ahead after the jump. Then a month later, a player called Chalmy found another technique, an MT boost panel. By releasing the MT on the very edge, the boost panel speeds you up in this direction, but as there's no ground beneath you, your sideways momentum persists. Chalmy used this to set a new world record, but already just a month later, SuperFX took it back, using a technique known as drift tricking. By doing a longer slide before tricking, boost panels give you a much faster launch. The slide duration had to be exact, but it was consistent to perform and was a neat time save. Just months after launch, players had saved a lot of time. Their runs reached the middle section sooner, and the spinning firebars now posed a problem. In lap 2, SuperFX delayed the mini turbo to avoid getting burned. He had reached what we call a pace lock, where a cycle-based element limits how fast you can drive. If he got there any sooner, he'd have to go around it, and this would annihilate his lead completely. But just weeks later, a player named Kai discovered a couple of things. By doing a right counterslide, he was able to squeeze in an empty boost panel, providing a brief speed increase. He also found a new corner cut by simply hopping over this gap, and these new finds opened the door for a potential pace break. With 2 new strategies in play, SuperFX deemed it possible to gather a big enough lead to go beneath the firebar. He swapped to Mach 8 for a smaller hitbox, because he needed all the room he could get, and after a few days of playing, SuperFX got this run. 153.085. Superflex had done it. The corner cut made him just fast enough to go beneath the fire. From there on out, he held it together and finished with an impressive time. The first pace break on Wario Stadium, and far ahead of second place. 152 was on the horizon, but Superflex was satisfied with his breakthrough and went on to compete elsewhere. This record would stand for nearly half a year unmatched, as the pace break was all or nothing. Other players weren't fast enough to go below the fire, so it wasn't until next April that someone would challenge him. That's when Chalmy made a return, and this time he had an ace up his sleeve. A player called Krep had stumbled upon something inconceivable, a technique that today is synonymous with Wario Stadium. That day, Krep gained time out of thin air, quite literally. The iconic Wario Stadium tech had just been discovered, and with a magic trick at his disposal, Chalmy broke the 153 barrier with a 152.995. It was a perplexing technique because it gained time in such an unusual manner, and the cause of it was equally strange. It only worked if you halted the car's rotation, by steering in the opposite direction of your drift. Up until now, players did what's known as soft drifting for the entirety of these launches. Mini-turbos build faster when steering anywhere below 44 degrees, but somehow, soft drifting lost speed in the air. After the first launch, you have momentum in this general direction, but the time spent on the second ramp is so brief, you can't regain traction. When drifting, the game tries to accelerate you to the side, making this the new forwards. But because Chalmy halted the car's rotation, while lacking traction, most of his momentum was now considered sideways. When the boost runs out, the game checks that your forward speed is below a certain point, but your sideways momentum remains untouched. So Chalmy zoomed through the air, until touching ground. When players saw this for themselves, they were completely baffled. This was the fastest airtime to date, and seeing his ghost shoot ahead like this was laughable. The room for improvement was greater than ever, and Wario Stadium remained heavily contested throughout the following months. A player called Kumachi got his first world record, improving it by 1 millisecond, and Chalmy swiftly beat him back the same day. Both of them kept at it, and a fight for the record was on. Just over a month later, the record stood at a 52.4, and in this time, many small optimizations had been made. They improved upon Kai's strategy by not doing a trick, which allowed them to carry sideways momentum beyond the last boost panel. They also found it was better to land on the left side of the second boost ramp. The road right after is slanted sideways, so launching off the left side makes you land later, prolonging the Wario Stadium tech and leading to a tighter line. Wario Stadium had become a uniquely elaborate time trial. The track was riddled with advanced techniques, and some of them weren't used on any other course. At this point, many considered Wario Stadium the most intricate track of them all. The strategies were convoluted and precise, and omitting them lost more than one could afford. This made Wario Stadium a staple track in competitive online, because there's only one shortcut, and those who know how to run can easily catch up or even break away. This made Wario Stadium increasingly popular to time trial, because driving technique was all that mattered. The track saw plenty of competition for the rest of the year, but some players had already cemented themselves atop the leaderboard. One of these players would stand out, as they gradually kept pushing the track lower. Kumachi started playing Wario Stadium right after the game's release, but having worked his way to the top, he now wished to take the track even further. Throughout the following year, he improved the record consistently, refining the way Wario Stadium is driven. These three vehicles share identical stats, but they differ in hitbox, which matters when close to walls. Optimizations come in all forms, and Kumachi figured out the Ink Striker was ideal, and after holding the record for a year straight, Kumachi got an incredible run. 152.058, an incredibly strong run. Kumachi's lead over second place was the biggest gap on the whole leaderboard, reflecting his speciality on the course. He really seemed unbeatable, and he had steadily progressed towards 151, a milestone that sparked major anticipation in the community. Just below the top 10, a player called Stir had been climbing the ranks. He had practiced the track several times before, but this time around it was easier to see what he could improve upon. Initially, all he had in mind was to maybe beat some of his friends, but after some time, he began noticing details Kumachi had overlooked. Before the glider, Kumachi does a chain, which means to seamlessly combine two boosts. When the shroom ends, you typically drop in speed, but when you chain this UMT, no time is wasted re-accelerating. However, Stir held the UMT all the way, and somehow he gained time from it. You might have noticed players have done the glider in distinct ways, going off the glider sideways to some degree. While in the boost, steering to the side doesn't reduce your forward speed, so when you angle the kart sideways, steering to the right moves you towards the finish line faster. This is called glider vectoring, and Stir had discovered a faster method, but Kumachi's run gave no room for breathing anywhere else. Stir had a long way to go, and he spent many days learning the nuances of every technique. At the double ramps, these 3 hops are crucial to initiate the forward launch, and after the third one, you get a small window to aim where you launch. Then you narrowly squeeze out an empty in the air, right before initiating the second launch. As mentioned earlier, landing on the left side of the panel is ideal. This allows for a risky second launch, but only if your inputs are on point, because over such a distance, it's easy to overshoot, and you might land in the mud. The difference between a perfect launch and failure is razor thin, and doing it well all 3 laps was already a big task. But after weeks of meticulous practice and steady improvements, Stir broke through and achieved the Wario Stadium record. Soon thereafter, he took the task at hand, and only 3 days later he drove the first 151, a 51.992. The community had been anticipating this barrier break, since it could be the last one the track would see, but nobody expected the first 51 to be done by a new face. Stir still had more left to prove, and after a few more weeks of playing, he had lowered the record down to an 871. This record remained at the top for over 200 days, but throughout the following year, Stir pushed the record further out of everyone's reach, even though no one else had a 51 yet. At this point, nobody knew the track as well as him, and he occasionally found optimizations in sections most considered downtime. He did a left-right air hop to gain nearly 0.1. He changed his water landings to carry more speed through this bounce. But most importantly, he tried to push the double ramps to perfection. Wario Stadium had become a long-term process for Stir, and whenever something new was found, no matter how small, he swiftly returned to improve. It was once discovered that by counter-hopping, you can empty trick the first boost ramp. This was high risk low reward, because the airtime reduced the time saved to just 0.05 of a second. But shortly after hearing about it, Stir used it to improve the record. In late 2019, a technique known as motion glider was discovered by the player Maisu. By pausing the game before a glider, you can enable motion controls. If you then tilt your controller down sideways, while also steering the joystick, the game stacks these 2 inputs, making you steer twice as much as intended. This amplifies glider vectoring, and when your vehicle's tilt stabilizes, the game gives you a speed boost proportional to the initial tilt. More tilt, more speed. However, on Wario Stadium, your gliding is confined by 2 surrounding walls, so for a long while, players believed motion glider would be useless. But 1 year after its discovery, players found a way. There wasn't time to tilt much, but it was enough for a good burst of speed. Motion glider gained 0.2 over the course of a run, and after playing for a couple days, Stir had about half a second lead over second place. This obviously wasn't going to last, but what happened next nobody could have foreseen. In speedrunning, reigns come and go, because when record holders face true competition, the little room left becomes the deciding difference. Players often think about how perfect a run can be, while attaining it is unrealistic. But on December 28th, a player named Madson appeared out of nowhere and gave Stir a run for his money, a run that was a glimpse of perfection. 151.432, an absurdly fast run. This record came as a shock to the community, as nobody could have foreseen Stur being dethroned this suddenly, nor in such spectacular fashion. In this world record run, Madson omitted the empty trick in the start, and in lap 2 he got the so-called lucky trick, letting him start adrift at the edge and land with an SMT. But the most shocking part was that Madson didn't use motion glider. Upon hearing that piece of information, players quickly realized just how surreal this record was. Madson has set world records in previous Mario Karts and has proven himself a force to be reckoned with. But in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, almost nobody knew of his presence until he one day revealed this. He had beaten the Wario Stadium record, losing a quarter of a second willingly. Players were in disbelief, and there were so many questions. How much experience did he have with the game? How long did it take him to get this? Why did he refrain from using certain strats? Looking at the internal timestamp, it says Madson's run was driven on October 4th, nearly 3 months prior to the date he revealed it. Back then, motion glider and the empty trick weren't yet found to be faster, explaining why Madson seemingly omitted them. There's a chance Madson left his console without power for months, causing the internal clock to desync, but assuming the date is correct, his motive for time trials was intriguing. Most players who set a record upload it right away, to ensure nobody beats them to the punch. But Madson likely got several runs faster than the world record at the time, and each and every time he decided not to upload. When he eventually got the 432 and saw this enormous lead on his screen, he finally felt satisfied, and rather than reveal his great achievement, he humbly kept the accomplishment to himself. It was now uncertain who would hold on to the record. Stur had some left in the tank, but Madson had 2 entire strategies. If he implemented them, a run of similar caliber would be a ridiculous 51.1. Players anticipated more records from him, but despite his incredible potential, Madson had stated he was going to step away from the game. He had all sorts of reasons to continue, as Stur narrowly reclaimed the throne the same day. But as Stur kept chipping away, there was nothing to be heard from his formidable opponent. Stur lowered the record down to a 308, and some months after that, he did the empty trick all 3 laps to drive a 256. He was very satisfied with this run overall, but knowing what Madson's run could have been, it still felt like he was living in the shadow of this mystic player. The lead these 2 players had over the rest was night and day. A handful of players had managed to get below 152 by now, but to match the top 2 players, diligence was needed. Wario Stadium at a high level was stupidly difficult, not only because every turn had been optimized, but also because of the blind maneuvers it involved. In the start, there's a blind turn right after the boost panel, and in the middle sector there's Wario Stadium tech, where you blindly aim 2 launches. It requires great attentiveness to sense where you have to steer in advance, and this precise control is what made these players stand out. When competing at the highest level, your vehicle option isn't a real choice. Others have already paved the ground, and it's incredibly rare for the agreed upon vehicle to focus on the wrong strengths. But sometimes it happens. 1 year after Madson's run, a player named LMDS was practicing Wario Stadium. LMDS mainly plays the game using inward drifting bikes, so to practice outward drift, he chose a similarly balanced kart. His choice? Waluigi Bidybuggy. For him, this was like learning the course anew, and perhaps this unique perspective made him more open-minded, because within just hours of practice, LMDS discovered something clever. The first turn of the track is a short left turn, where players release an SMT right away. This clearly was the best approach, as you take the tightest line possible, but LMDS noticed that with a high MT stat, he could land early from the glider to start charging the mini turbo earlier. With this extra time on the ground, he could maybe turn the SMT into a UMT. At first he couldn't make it around the following turn, because his angle was too sharp, but then he found a small tweak. By doing a short counterslide upon landing, the vehicle rotated to the right, which in turn gave him more room to soft drift to the left. The sparks turned yellow earlier than ever, and on New Year's Day, LMDS revealed a new strategy. This satisfying sequence was a brilliant combination of separate ideas. Sometimes players are missing several pieces of the puzzle, and a fresh pair of eyes can uncover what changes the game. This unity gains a lot of time as you speed around the corner, and you can chain the SMT right after, gaining additional time. This whole sequence is only possible with a high mini turbo stat, but it still wasn't enough to remain ahead of the Ink Striker. Thankfully, there already existed a similar strat, one that players had been using online. In the anti-gravity section, players had been jumping over the gap, but by holding a perfect soft drift angle, it's barely possible to charge and release an SMT just before the ramp. Now that there were two strats only the biddy buggy could do, there was good reason to believe it was faster, and this led to an interesting dynamic when racing. The Ink Striker would pull ahead in lap 1 with its superior speed stat, but then the biddy buggy would overtake it by doing the SMT. This gives a strong lead into the ending section, yet the Ink Striker takes it back before the line. It was like a tug of war. The biddy buggy was commonly used in time trials, unlike the Ink Striker, and this made it easy for players to adapt. Many players achieved mid to high 51s, bringing the competition much closer than previously. However, stir wasn't gone, and after spending a week adjusting to the vehicle, Wario Stadium underwent a revolution. $151.250. A small improvement, but a major shift. This new vehicle made some parts of the track more forgiving, but while it was easier to handle, the difficulty of the track simply took a new shape. In laps 2 and 3, you enter anti-gravity with an SMT active, and you have to chain this MT before the SMT runs out. If you miss the chain, you get a slow jump, and lose time during it and after it. After the jump, you want to stick to the soft drift angle and drift across the gap, because during the air pocket, soft drifting doesn't turn your vehicle as much. It was hard to tell how much potential this vehicle had, because getting both strats perfect in the same lap rarely happened, but after a few months' absence, Stir got back to work. He soon lowered the record to a midpoint 1, and it was at this point that he saw there was potential for a new milestone, a 150. His best splits combined now gave it time just within that range, and this made him very motivated to see what he could achieve. He improved to a 127, then a 110, before reaching into the .0 range. From here on out, progress got much harder, because entering this final stretch, he was always conscious of what was on the line. Every segment of the run was pushed to near perfection, as he went dangerously close to everything in his way. There were just a few weak points he had to fix, and it was now only a matter of time. He kept at it for another week, gradually lowering the record, and on June 12th, Stir drove this iconic run. $150.994, a monumental breakthrough. This was a record to behold. It marked an incredible milestone being reached, and a devoted endeavor coming to an end. Stir was playing with fire throughout the entire run, but that's what it takes to get a truly exceptional time. He had driven so fast, he almost clipped a fireball passing through the grates, leaving almost no time left to spare. The track was almost pace locked once more, this time so near perfection, it would never be worth going around. and with this mission complete, Stur was thrilled and relieved to take a step back from playing. As for his incredible achievement, he left it to stand the test of time. About a year later, something unforeseeable happened. In the fourth wave of the Booster Course Pass, Nintendo buffed many characters and vehicle parts, and this retroactively made all time trial records weaker. Every course in the game was affected, so players scrambled for world records and top 10s throughout the game. And because of this, Stur returned to defend Wario Stadium. The new meta was quickly determined to be Yoshi Teddy Buggy, a combo that after the buff had such a high MT stat, players could charge a UMT in the first turn of lap 1, no need for leeway. The MT buff gained a lot of time throughout the track, and Stur soon left his old record in the dust. Yoshi Teddy Buggy also yields great handling, but it took many months for players to take advantage of this. This combo builds mini turbos very quickly, and in early 2024, Stur found he could hold a soft drift until the SMT was ready, and then counter hop to get out of trouble. This was an easy time save, and did not take long to learn, but soon thereafter, the player Alberto built upon the technique, inventing a strategy of his own. Alberto's concept was to release this MT early and see what happens, but when he tried it, he saw a better alternative, utilizing a very niche mechanic. A player called Kusan once discovered that trick boost can be prolonged, by landing into a drift and doing a hop the moment it ends. This technique was dubbed Kusan slide, or slide jump for short, and then years down the line, the MT slide jump was discovered. Alberto used it in a world record on Sherbet Land, to gain one measly frame. Yes, MTSJs in and of themselves are very weak, but just like a regular SJ, they make your vehicle maintain sideways momentum. By angling the kart sharply, Alberto did a strong MTSJ and carried momentum into a right drift off the boost panel. If he could recover his line towards the shortcut, this would have great potential, and after some trial and error, Alberto changed Wario Stadium forever. A right drift in a left turn. It was bewildering to say the least, and it gained 0.1 per lap. Previously, players did a left-right air hop after this boost panel, but if you air hop to the right, landing into a left drift leads to this quirk. Alberto did a right drift, and because of this, he could release a mini turbo in the air and land into a left drift. This allowed him to angle the kart before entering the water, and whereas others had to sink to stop floating sideways, Alberto could keep doing exactly that, skipping the ramp entirely. Alberto was kind enough to share his strategy before utilizing it, but he soon found himself getting splits faster than the world record. This was a rare opportunity, and Stur, with all his experience, was yet to understand the technique. Alberto kept trying throughout that day, feeling the time pressure of the situation, but unfortunately he was out of luck, because later that night, Stur got the MTSJ in a world record. Stur had maintained the chokehold on Wario Stadium for years, and he was unwilling to let it slip, be it due to stat changes or strat changes. This was a close call for Stur, and it was evident that the MTSJ had a lot of depth to it, because all players struggled to do it well on command. After the drop down, you have no option but to soft drift, release MT, hop, slide, slide jump. The MTSJ must be done within frames after the MT runs out, so this whole sequence decides how good of a launch you'll get. This also creates an element of improvisation in the ending sequence, due to variance in that first launch. It's best to time your sinking so that you land on the edge of the ramp, to regain traction before the shroom is used, but the angle you enter the water with varies slightly every time, and this makes the landing hard to predict. A few players soon breached into the top 10, utilizing the newfound strategy, but it would take a while for everyone to update their times. Stur kept refining how he did the MTSJ, and as his sum of best kept decreasing, he couldn't help but think about one last hurdle that could be cleared, a 149. Stur had worked hard to achieve the first 150, only for his run's glory to be cut short. But now there was another potential milestone, also at the edge of feasibility. His best splits didn't give it yet, but maybe there was a chance at redemption. When Stir went for 150, his runs would reach the fire bar in lap 3 right as it passes through the floor. But in his latest record, he seemed to be right on time to instead play limbo. Together with some other players, Stir compared the two lines, and they found the time saved by going below would make 149 feasible. A new pace break was on the table, and Stir started practicing right away. At first, he simulated the cycle by waiting a lap for his ghost, but soon it was time for the real deal, where the suspense would be crushing. You won't know if you'll survive or not until you're there. You just have to go for it, and one day in March, that's what Stir did. Just from watching, you can feel the tension of the fire bar coming up, but once you cleared it, a crucial bit of potential was unlocked. In the 7 years this course had been out, all previous world records were in the 150 range, but now Stir had the chance to breach into the 140 range. It's these unforgettable milestones that players are willing to strive for, and the idea of a 149 was one Stir couldn't ignore. So that month, Stir embarked on a journey, one more time. A 149.988, the first 149 ever driven, and a monumental moment in the track's history. Stir's chase was finally over, and the digits on screen were a sight to behold. The time almost looked surreal, but the coveted 149 was a reality, and reactions were pouring in from the community. This was the final barrier to be broken, and the track had come full circle. Years prior, the firebar had posed the exact same problem, but once a player dares to go below and beyond, it sets a precedent, bringing the competition to the next level. Wario Stadium now felt like a finished task, and the record ran at the top of the leaderboards as the sole 149. The following year, Stir returned to push the record a bit further, but this time he had great reason. Stir's dominance of Wario Stadium had long felt like a blowout, but ever since the vehicle update, his lead had diminished. Over a year had passed since the update, and in that time, a handful of players had crept closer. One of those players, climbing steadily in the background, was Kucero. Kucero first played the track late in 2022, but it wasn't until over a year later that he'd really pushed himself for a strong time. Kucero breached into the top 10 with his staggering run. The lap 2 was only decent, but his lap 3, that lap was the fastest ever driven. Kucero had done what we call a sandwich choke, where his slow second lap eases the pressure, conditioning the player to go all in to top off the run. If the middle lap was better, he could have jumped straight to a 50.6, right behind the world record. Ever since Madson made his grand appearance, Stur never had to face any formidable opponents. But just like him, Kucero was willing to put in the work. 2025 was a new year, and after 1 year's absence, Kucero went back to Wario Stadium. In this time, he had really grown as a player, and he soon showed to only have gotten more potential. He shared his progress daily, gradually lowering his personal best. But as usual, Stur wouldn't sit and watch his reign fall to the ground, so he soon lowered the record to a 947. It was a rare sight to see Stur having close competition, and to avoid getting toppled, he had to move fast. However, it's easier to chase than to be chased, and having been the underdog for all this time, this player was ready to give it his all. And in March 2025, Kucero did the unthinkable. That month, Kucero had gone on a world record tear, lowering the record down to a whopping 149.843. He had actually fallen behind Stur's run in lap 1, so he decided to kick it up a notch and drove the fastest lap 2 ever. He remained focused for the final lap, and finished up this blazingly fast run. The caliber of this record was out of this world, but also shocking was the fact Kucero had overtaken Stur, who besides one hiccup, hadn't missed a day of holding the record for 5 years. For all this time, Stur had strived to remain far ahead of the curve, but after years at the top, he had been surpassed by a player who shared the same diligence to the track. Kucero's determination made him seek out one of the hardest records to beat, and thanks to him, Wario Stadium is no longer a one-man journey. Kucero and Stur are both likely contenders, and as of making this video, this is where the record stands today. Time and time again, new discoveries reshaped how Wario Stadium is played, and milestones that seemed out of the question were eventually far surpassed. This has made the track somewhat of a spectacle, because it truly appeared boundless as to how fast players could drive it, due to its uniquely high skill ceiling. Seeing these players push the limits has been inspiring to many of us over the years, and the story of Wario Stadium is still far from over. It's only getting wilder from here on out, because on Wario Stadium, only the most competitive will prevail. Thank you for watching.